Hi there, I'm Ashley Stone. I'm a student currently earning a Master's of Natural Resources at the University of Georgia, and I'd just like to tell you a little of what I've learned about the banana industry. Something I probably don't need to tell you is that bananas are important in the United States. As a matter of fact, they are the most popular fruit. And more bananas are consumed annually than apples and oranges combined. And the average American eats 26 pounds of bananas annually. That's a lot. But the United States produces 1/100th of 1% of the world's bananas. So you gotta know that all those bananas are not coming from this country. So you have to wonder, where do they come from? Well, the top 10 countries to export bananas to the United States are the following: Guatemala, Ecuador, Costa Rica, Honduras, Colombia, Mexico, Nicaragua, Peru, Panama, and the Dominican Republic. Do you notice any geographic or political trends in this list? Well, to me, the first thing that sticks out is that all of the countries are part of the region of Latin America, and that's important to know for later on. Bananas are cultivated mostly on large plantations. 70% of those are located in Latin America, which kind of makes sense given what we learned from the last slide. In the United States specifically, almost all bananas come from the United Fruit Company, Standard Fruit Company, or the West Indies Fruit Company. So those names don't really sound familiar. You probably know them by their other names: Chiquita, Dole, or Del Monte. So these companies changed their names because they had really bad press for awful treatment of workers. And instead of significantly improving the treatment, they just changed the names of their companies. We've all been there, so imagine with me right now. You overslept your alarm to that 8 a.m. class, so you throw on a t-shirt, grab a perfectly yellow banana on your way out the door of your apartment, and run to the bus stop. As you unpeel that banana, you calculate. You should be only about 5 minutes late to class. And there's no test today, so it's not the end of the world, you think, as you munch that banana. And at least you won't be starving. So, no problem, right? Actually, yeah, there are lots of problems, and they're all contained in the story behind that pretty yellow banana. Problem number one is that of monoculture. So monoculture, the name is pretty intuitive. Mono means single or one, and culture means tilling of the land. So monoculture, of course, means using a plot of land to grow only one variety of crop. Monoculture has allowed many advances in agriculture, such as mechanization. So, in a way, it's a really good thing. It has been a good thing for us. However, all things in moderation. Because when practiced to an extreme, monoculture causes soil nutrients to be depleted. Organic matter is not returned to the soil in a natural way, and crop yields become precarious. Some of the key environmental problems that will come up with too much monoculture include contamination of water sources, massive levels of waste, soil erosion, increased risk of flooding, deforestation, destruction of habitats, destruction of soil fertility, which results in higher fertilizer use, etc. If you ever head out into your natural environment, it will become pretty apparent pretty early on that monoculture is not the natural way the environment works. Just one variety of one crop? No, you see lots when you're in a forest or whatever. So, in order to maintain that monoculture, you have to add stuff to make it continue to function and produce the crop. So you'll need vast quantities of herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, and synthetic fertilizers. So what? We're adding a little bit to make it work better, right? Well, the problem is that fertilizers and pesticides pollute water channels and they lead to eutrophication, which results in the destruction of aquatic ecosystems. Also, carelessly stored chemicals can seep into the soil and water courses, leading to soil erosion and water pollution. Do you remember when we read the article called The Conquest of the Land? That article described environmental degradation in different sites all over the world. And if you notice, then the degradation was always accompanied by soil erosion. So we should avoid soil erosion because otherwise it's just a slippery slope to degrading the environment. So let's avoid it. That takes us to problem number 2, which is that of genetic homogeny. So crops are precarious when they are all the same variety. Lack of genetic variety makes plants highly susceptible to pests, fungi, and diseases. And because of that, you have to use a lot of insecticides and other pesticides. But, that should be no problem because there are more than 1,000 varieties of bananas on the earth. But if you look at that picture on the right, you probably haven't ever seen that much variety of banana varieties before. Yet, 90% of bananas eaten in the developed world today come from one single cultivar, called the Cavendish. That is probably why you didn't know there were so many different kinds of bananas. I at least didn't know there was that much variety in the different kinds of bananas and plantains in the world. So I have to ask, why do we only grow Cavendish bananas? Well, you have to go back to 1903. There was a banana disease called Race 1, and it ravaged the export plantations of Latin America and the Caribbean. Within 50 years, Race 1 drove the world's only export banana species to virtual extinction. So they had to find a new variety of bananas that they could continue exporting and making money off of. So for that reason, the Cavendish cultivar was developed for international export. Basically, just because Race 1 couldn't kill it. Actually, there were a couple other pretty big important factors in developing and selecting the Cavendish. Like, it's really sweet, it has a nice texture, and it's seedless. bet you never knew that most bananas have big seeds in them. But you know, it kind of makes sense because fruits usually do have seeds. I just never thought of it. So, it looks like after the big banana disease of 1903 called Race 1, the industry put all its eggs in one basket. And that was risky. So far, no problem. But it looks like their luck is running out now. Not to be corny, but there is a new kid on the block called Tropical Race 4. And it presents exactly the problem which confronts the world. Tropical Race 4 is looming above the banana industry, like a self-satisfied John Wilkes Booth peering down on Abraham Lincoln before shooting him. Actually, that's kind of weird. You don't have to think of it in that way. But, at any rate, Tropical Race 4 is a problem. It has already caused $400 million of damage in the Philippines, which has not affected us in the United States because, as we looked at earlier in the presentation, we don't get all that many bananas from the Philippines. Most of them come from Latin America. But Tropical Race 4 is capable of killing at least 80% of the bananas and plantains produced each year. At least 80%. And here's the rub. Cavendish bananas do not have resistance. If 80% of bananas died, it would cause an inconvenience for us in the developed world. For example, no banana sandwiches, no banana bread, no banana splits. But what if your entire livelihood was based on your job working in the banana industry? If all the bananas die, you don't get paid. Eventually, you lose your job. All your friends lose their jobs. The economy crashes because nobody has money. The banana companies abandon the figurehead president of your country, and he has no idea how to manage any of these enormous problems like widespread poverty and starvation, because the poor guy is just a figurehead. So the country falls into chaos until a coup d'etat overthrows the president, and suddenly your country is controlled by a crazy military dictatorship. Meanwhile, you can't provide food for your disabled child, and nobody wants to hire you because you are barely literate, because you dropped out of school when you were 11 years old to provide an extra income for your family, scraping by on the meager salary of all illiterate banana harvesters of bananas that are sold for 12 cents each at Trader Joe's. Do you see the problem here? Banana Republic. It's more than just a hip clothing store. Banana Republic is a term from political science that was originally invented to describe unstable Latin American countries like Honduras, whose entire economy was wrapped up on the production of bananas. And the government was also dependent because government leaders realized the importance of the banana industry. By the way, when a government leader really did try to fight for workers' rights in the banana industry in his country, the banana companies overthrew him and set up a figurehead president. So right now I'm referencing Guatemala and Jacobo Arbenz, who fought for agrarian reform, and Castillo Armas, who was the puppet of United Fruit Company. Can't make this stuff up, kids. But Americans continued to believe that it was no problem because we were taught through propaganda, or not us, not we, but that generation was made to believe through propaganda that this was an American victory over communism in Guatemala. Another problem is that there were violent union crackdowns that discouraged banana workers from demanding humane rights for working. Basically, the government and economy of a nation is crippled from taking real strides toward development. Why? Because the entire political and economic systems are overly dependent on the involvement of a foreign industry, in this case, bananas. And that is not a nice thing to have on your conscience. I've alluded to some of the human rights issues that employees of the banana industry must face. As I've mentioned, by planting bananas in monoculture, plenty of chemicals like pesticides must be sprayed over the plantations. Unfortunately, these chemicals are dangerous. They've been proven to cause serious birth defects, skin discoloration, sterility, and cancer. Often, they are so toxic to humans, the EPA has declared them illegal to use in the United States. So what gives? Well, they aren't illegal in most of the developing countries that we've mentioned. So banana companies just spray them there. And with unsafe procedure, while the workers are present in the fields and without informing them of the risk. In addition to that, plantation conditions are harsh. Female and male workers often work for 14 hours a day, without overtime, in unbearable heat, for up to 6 days a week. Children, some as young as 8, wield sharp tools and pull loads of bananas from place to place in the plantation. They lack adequate access to drinking water and bathrooms. Well below half are attending school. Remember those World Development Goals? Well, if we're going to reach any of those, these conditions have got to improve. Also, notice that it costs more to buy an apple, which, by the way, is produced in the United States, probably less than 500 miles from your grocery store, than a banana, which is produced thousands of miles away and has to be transported with care because bananas bruise so easily. Have you ever considered that oddity? I hadn't, but think about it. Cheap bananas really ought to be an oxymoron. So, how does Chiquita make that miracle of pricing? Well, by paying nothing to their employees. Many workers fail to earn a living wage to cover their basic needs such as housing, food, clothing, and education. But surprise, surprise, the banana companies refuse to take responsibility for their behavior. Well, it's a grim picture I painted here in this presentation. You may be thinking, I don't want to endorse this, but what can I do? Well, I wish there were an easy way to take a stand against this issue as a consumer. But unfortunately, almost the entire market is crowded by unethical companies like Chiquita, Dole, and Del Monte. But here's what I've discovered over the past few months to help me consume more responsibly. First of all, organic bananas. Organic bananas may mean that workers are not exposed to horrific chemicals, which is good. But it's not a total solution because they do not typically improve wages or other working conditions for laborers. If you want to go this route, you can buy organic bananas at the grocery co-op on Prince Avenue. Alternatively, you can buy bananas produced at Earth University. That is a private agricultural institution in Costa Rica. And yeah, the bananas are pretty expensive, but the profits go straight to providing scholarships. And I have a few friends who are on scholarship at Earth University from developing countries, and I can promise you the money is worth it. This is how the world is going to change. So if you want to go this route, in Georgia, you can buy Earth bananas at Whole Foods markets. But unfortunately, there are no Whole Foods in Athens, Georgia, yet. So another solution is this. Ask your local grocery store to start carrying Earth bananas instead of or in addition to the cheaper, less ethical option. Just tell them that you would be willing to pay the little bit of extra to know that you're making a good choice with your money. Another option is to just buy a banana tree. Given the climate change, which apparently does not exist, now we can grow bananas in Georgia. It's true. I know people who have done it. So you probably will want to put your banana tree in a pot, because if it does freeze during the winter, the banana is not going to like that. So again, buy a banana tree and it will start bearing fruit in about 2 years. Yeah. So maybe you don't really like any of those options. None of them are really all that convenient for you, or maybe they're not doing as much good as you want them to do. So I have one solution that to me is the easiest solution. That is, choose to buy apples and other locally produced fruit instead. You don't have to buy bananas. And this is a good way to do that whole eating locally thing, and to make absolute sure that you are not funding an industry that is causing so much harm to other people around the world. So, yeah, like vote with your dollar and stuff like that.